Hi, and thank you for visiting my channel. For more information, kindly subscribe and follow. Now let's get started. WWE Hall of Famer Bully Ray has taken to social media to share that he is conflicted between Rhea Ripley and CM Punk's current stories on Raw. He is heavily invested in both storylines. The Second City Sink has been feuding with Drew McIntyre for quite some time now. Their clash at the Royal Rumble resulted in the former AEW champion sustaining an injury that sidelined him for several months. They finally faced each other at SummerSlam, and Seth Rollins served as the special guest referee for the bout. The Scottish Warrior won the first match. Rhea Ripley's feud with Liv Morgan is kind of similar. Mommy was also injured by the current Women's World Champion and was out of action for a few months. Just like Punk, Rhea also lost at SummerSlam due to a third party's involvement. On Raw this week, Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest were assaulted by the New Judgment Day. On the same show, CM Punk challenged Drew McIntyre to a strap match at WWE Bash in Berlin. Bully Ray took to X to share that he's unsure which storyline he's more invested in. He said it's a good problem for WWE to have, because it means that the stories are captivating. At Bash in Berlin, it'll be Dominic Mysterio and Liv Morgan versus the Terror Twins in a mixed tag team match. The atmosphere backstage at WWE Raw was electric, with the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. As the legendary Triple H made his way through the labyrinth of hallways, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, wrestling with a dilemma that had been gnawing at him for weeks. The current stories of two of WWE's most polarizing figures, Rhea Ripley, the dominant force in the women's division, and CM Punk, the self-proclaimed best in the world, had left him torn between loyalty, business, and the future of the company he helped shape. Rhea Ripley had taken Raw by storm. Her rise to prominence was nothing short of meteoric. With every match, she solidified her status as a powerhouse, leaving a trail of broken opponents and shattered dreams in her wake. Her affiliation with the Judgment Day had only added to her aura of invincibility. Triple H had always admired her relentless drive and her unapologetic attitude, traits that reminded him of his younger self. Yet, there was something unsettling about the path she was treading. The dark influence of the Judgment Day, led by Finn Balor, had turned her into a force that seemed almost uncontrollable. On the other side of the spectrum was CM Punk. His return to WWE had been one of the most talked about moments in wrestling history. After years away, Punk's return brought back memories of the old days when his rebellious nature and scathing promos turned him into a household name. Triple H had a complicated history with Punk. Their relationship had always been contentious, marked by clashes of ego and ideology. Yet, Triple H couldn't deny Punk's impact on the industry or his ability to captivate an audience. But as much as he respected Punk's legacy, he knew that Punk had a tendency to cause chaos wherever he went, and his current story on Raw was no exception. The locker room was divided. Some saw Punk as a savior, a voice that could once again shake the foundations of WWE. Others viewed him as a ticking time bomb, ready to implode at any moment and take the company down with him. Rhea, on the other hand, had the full support of the Judgment Day, and by extension, a faction of the roster who believed that her dominance was necessary to keep the women's division relevant and feared. Triple H entered the gorilla position, where the show was being run. The monitors displayed Rhea Ripley's promo, where she was addressing the Raw crowd. Her words were sharp, her demeanor menacing. She spoke about her plans to destroy anyone who dared challenge her reign, and how the Judgment Day was unstoppable. The crowd was a mix of cheers and boos, but it was clear that Rhea was a force to be reckoned with. As Triple H watched, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride mixed with concern. Rhea was a product of the NXT system he had nurtured, and seeing her flourish on the main roster was validation of his work. But the darkness that surrounded her, the influence of the Judgment Day, worried him. He knew what that kind of power could do to someone, and he feared that Rhea might lose herself in the process. Just as Rhea's promo ended, the camera cut to a backstage segment where CM Punk was being interviewed. He was his usual self, confident, articulate, and full of disdain for anyone who questioned him. Punk spoke about his intentions on Raw, how he was there to cleanse the company of the corruption that had seeped into its core. He took shots at the current management, alluding to past grievances, and hinted at taking down anyone who stood in his way, including those who were considered untouchable. Triple H clenched his jaw as he listened. Punk was as inflammatory as ever, pushing buttons and stoking the flames of controversy. But there was truth in some of what he said, and that truth was what made Triple H's decision so difficult. Punk had the potential to bring a fresh, unfiltered energy to Raw, something that could be both a blessing and a curse. But the risk of letting Punk run wild was enormous. The last thing WWE needed was another public fallout. As the show progressed, Triple H found himself pacing in his office. He had meetings lined up, decisions to make, but his mind kept drifting back to Rhea and Punk. They represented two very different sides of the business, Rhea, the future of the women's division, and Punk, a relic of the past who refused to fade away. Both had the power to shape the direction of Raw, but in very different ways. The tipping point came during the main event, where Rhea Ripley and CM Punk found themselves in the same ring. It wasn't a match, but a confrontation that had been brewing for weeks. Rhea, flanked by the Judgment Day, stood her ground as Punk, alone but defiant, faced her down. The tension was palpable as the two exchanged words, each trying to assert their dominance over the other. Triple H watched from the back, knowing that this moment could define the future of Raw. If Punk and Rhea clashed, it could tear the locker room apart. But it could also create a storyline that would go down in history as one of the greatest rivalries WWE had ever seen. The question was, at what cost? As the show went off the air, Triple H knew he had to make a decision. The fate of Raw rested in his hands. He could side with Rhea, supporting her dominance and the rise of the Judgment Day, or he could back Punk, giving him the freedom to reshape Raw in his own image. Both choices had their merits and their dangers, but one thing was clear, there could be no middle ground. The legend was conflicted, torn between loyalty to the future and respect for the past. But he knew that whatever decision he made, it would have repercussions that would be felt for years to come. And as he left the arena that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter what, Raw would never be the same again.